Doug, it's great to be with you today, and all the folks online in this new year 2022. I know Dentsu's been leading the charge in a number of different areas in the industry, as you know, we're in such a fast-moving landscape. It's yet kind of another inflection point maybe in the industry, and one of the areas that I know you and your organization have been very active in over the last couple of years now, I believe, is the area of attention. So I thought we would start with that as a topic for today, and if you could tell us a little bit more about how you've been leaning in and what you've understood from the work that you've done already on that topic.
Yeah, I think that the first thing to realize is how much we are under assault from attention. I just saw this morning, and the amount of viewership that is eroding away and slipping from traditional kind of ways that we watched video, which was more long format, to how we're all consuming now in scroll, shorter, more like less serial and more of the moment in the moment from a content standpoint is absolutely crazy. And what that means is, like, attention is just under assault. Like, we are getting bombarded every day. I think the average consumer is getting anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 advertising messages a day. So what really matters is are people attentive? Are they paying attention? Forget ratings, forget everything else. And we can have a conversation, I'm sure, in a little bit about ratings. But, you know, we have to think about the fact that, are we even making an impact? And, you know, one thing I always say is we know it ourselves, because everyone who's listening right now, how attentive are you to this conversation? Are you multitasking? How many windows do you have open? Are you looking at your phone that's right next to you? And that's just here in this. But then you take it over to your viewing. How many of you have skipped a commercial in the last 24 hours? How many of you are watching Netflix where there is no commercials? And so this notion of attention is something we all have to figure out, and not just how we plan, but actually, can we trade and measure on that as well? So we've been embarked on this since 2019 was the first time that we started working on this. And we're now in wave 3, and Teads has been a good partner in a lot of the work we've done, where we're really trying to understand how and what is the impact of everything going on in media consumption with consumers around attention. How can we actually understand the value of advertising across different channels, across different devices, across different platforms, and what's the engagement that consumers have in all of this, and then how do we understand the attentiveness through that as well? And all of this, we're calling this idea around the attention economy as we look at it.
And Doug, I think, you know, you alluded to the fact that kind of trading, planning, and media buying on attention is something that you're actively working on. It's no small undertaking to change the primary currencies of our media ecosystem. How, you know, what challenges do you see in kind of moving the needle in that direction, and what do you think we need to do as an industry to get there?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to create a baseline. And so a lot of the initial work, we're at wave 3 or phase 3 of the work we've been doing since 19. And a lot of the initial work was really understanding across linear TV, in-feed social, pre-roll OTT, all the video, because we're right now, we started in the video space. And what we wanted to do across the UK, US, and Australia to begin with was understand people's attention through a couple of different measurements. First is looking at screen data to understand actual people's viewability. The next is eye gaze data, measuring attention. And then we wanted to understand the advertising strength using sales uplift through an emulated model, a virtual store. And by bringing all this together, we start to understand what's kind of these baseline factors into attention. And there's media factors, and then there's meaning factors. Media factors are things like, is the unit in feed versus in stream? Is it forced viewing? What's the duration? How big is it? Is a little big thing? Like all of these more kind of media decisions, but the meaning ones are just as important. And this is where like some of the work that you guys helped us with around creative. What's the value of creative to somebody's attention? Another one is targeting. Like, so we think about, and as media practitioners, we make a lot of decisions around, is it this or is it that? Is it here or is it there? But the other important factors to attention is how good's the creative? What's the message? And who are you showing the message to? So we've understand the actual correlation of all of those. And now we can start to think about then how do we build better statistical models? And that's kind of the next step that we went into.
And in all of that work, are there areas that have been surprising to you, or counterintuitive based on some of the kind of commonly accepted wisdom in our industry, or is there something that seems like it's not on people's radars enough?
Well, no, actually, I mean, yes and no, I'll say. The most critical factor to attention is creative. I think it's something like 17 or 18% of driving somebody's attention is based on the creative. But then you start getting into what I'll say common sense. Are you forcing the ad or not forcing the ad? That has a play on it. Is sound on or not? That has another place. So I think there's some elements in there where we've been able to codify that. I think the other really interesting thing is then we've moved this into a currency for buying, whereby, and we're just calling it right now, the effective attention CPM. So we're able to understand a normal CPM versus an EA CPM. And what's really interesting is if you look at one social platform, right? They charge more for in-stream versus in-feed. But the effective attention CPM is the inverse. So why would you pay if somebody's attention is different? Or for another media owner, they charge the same across a lot of their video products, but we know a few instances where attention is greater. So we're going to start to buy more of that and less of some of the other things. So we're able to start to now make decisions on this. And where we want to get to is where we can hold media owners accountable to the delivery against that attention CPM as we look at it.
That's great. I think in general, I tend not to be supportive of additional acronyms for our industry, but this is one I could definitely get behind. Well, I think the EA CPM is a great initiative.
And what I'll say is, I don't know if that's the right acronym, because one thing, the reason we're calling it the attention economy is it needs to be an end-to-end. This needs to be something that is supported openly across the industry. And that's why we're working with every possible media owner we can as we think about this, as well as measurement and other people in the ecosystem, because it can't just be in this myopic view. If it's going to be something that we look at across the entire media economy.
And Doug, how do you think addressability plays into your efforts around attention?
Yeah, well, I mean, it just comes down to, I think, the notion of relevancy. The better relevant the ad, theoretically, the more attentive the consumer will be to it. If I'm not in market, we know that is a mechanism to decrease attention. Again, pretty common sense if you think about it, but to actually have the quantification of what that is, and then to be able to attach all the work we're doing here to then our identity and addressable, platform M1 and all of that capability allows us then to start to think about how reaching the right person will also propel your attention as much as having the right creative and having the right kind of media decisioning.
And how are you guys, guys and gals at Dentsu, going about some of the challenges that addressability faces in with all of the data deprecation, which everyone on this Zoom will be very familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to have in my back corner Merkle, and they've been preparing and actually propagating the demise of a cookie as we move from less opaque, or very opaque kind of ways of understanding people to much more deterministic. So we are ready for a first party driven world. We believe that the cookie is not the perfect solution. Understand it was a solution that everyone drove towards. But as we look forward to where we are, I'm fortunate to have an identity platform that's connected to inventory decisions. So I can understand if an ad is served in one place by a specific individual, if it's viewed, if it's actioned upon, if it isn't, how then I can deliver another ad someplace else and truly get away from, undetermined to that deterministic delivery of advertising.
Interesting. Maybe let's come back to the topic of creative for a moment. I mean, you mentioned that it is a critical driving factor of attention. We're in an ecosystem that has become very, very focused on every cell in the Excel sheet or in the report or in the analytics. How do we, as a media ecosystem, reconcile those two things? And maybe curious to hear a little bit about how how Dentsu is structuring their approach to maybe a better marriage in between creative and media.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an industry, one of the biggest challenges, the pendulum has swung all the way to the precision approach, where we're all looking to optimize and probably over the last couple of years, as everyone's been forced to do that because of the pressures around the pandemic, around limited dollars, what it might be. We need to get from precision back to the art of persuasion, and how you balance those two together. A lot of times people talk about brand to demand, and I think what's really important is to talk about brand and demand. There's an interesting intersection at that moment of where brand and demand overlap, which is consideration. And I think the middle of the funnel, as we would think about it, is really where I think a lot of hearts and minds are won at once. And if you're too precise and just optimizing your lower funnel to the nth degree, you're going to miss the persuasion. At the same time, if you're too broad and just reach based, you're going to miss the conversion. So I think this growing need on middle funnel is really important for us as we think about how we then drive better consideration into intention.
Yeah, it's very interesting. let's shift gears for a moment. There's a lot of conversation in the advertising space, the media space, and more broadly, also the technology space around the promise of the next iteration of the web 3, and whether that's metaverse for you or all the different variations and flavors that we're starting to see there. What is that? First of all, what does web 3 mean for you, and how are you trying to harness the potential for Dentsu and more broadly across the advertising landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is talking about the pieces. I think it's important we talk about the broader change that's on us, right? Everyone's talking about the metaverse. Everyone's talking about NFTs. I think those are elements to a bigger change. And if you just step back and look at like what Web3 is, if you think about Web1 was .com, it's the late 90s, early 2000s, leading up to Web 2 being the invention of this, right? And how we have the power of all computing in our pocket. Web 3 really takes that power and decentralizes that. So you move from connected to mobile to decentral, in kind of this third wave, and from a advertising standpoint, and to stay with the P's, if we're moving from precision to persuasion, now we got to get to a bit of pioneering. And I think that's what's going to be the best thing about what Web3 is going to force us all to do is get back to some of that pioneering roots that we saw in 2007 and 8, where, some of the greatest marketing was happening at that time, or some of the early kind of 2000s when everyone was trying to figure out, building their first websites or doing some of their first digital advertising. The pioneering spirit of what we'll do in some of these places and spaces, I think are really interesting for me. In the end, I think what Web3 will allow us to do is, and this is a line I've been using, is like, we've been talking a lot about how you get consumers to become members, but now how do you get members to become owners? Owners of your business, owners of your brand. And that's really what a decentralized mentality will allow us to do.
And I think, the spirit of pioneering, as you put it, is really what's needed when we have new technologies. How do you see kind of your most forward-thinking clients tolerate that pioneering spirit at a time where, as you've been saying, precision and optimization is really what's demanded? And how is it is it a talent thing? Is it a kind of company culture to allow for people to make mistakes, because mistakes come along with pioneering? How should folks be thinking about taking, in some cases, a leap of faith into something that's new for them, like what we're seeing with Web3?
Yeah, I don't think it's blind innovation. I think what's really important is intentionality, and that any innovation should be based on a very well articulated test and learn program. There needs to be KPIs, benchmarks, expected outcomes, and also expected returns. The expected return might just be to get a baseline for how we improve on that baseline. Or it could be business value back to the organization in some capacity. But there needs to be a reason to do it. I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, which is consistent with other innovative time periods, is people just doing for the sake of doing. And that feels a lot like shiny object syndrome, where, and we've seen this before, and we'll see it again. But I think the most important and most successful way of dealing with innovation is in a much more intentional way, having a blueprint for why are you doing this, not just doing to do.
Yeah, I think that that will certainly resonate with a lot of folks, and it's a real interesting opportunity also from not just an advertising standpoint, but in terms of how content is created and how content is distributed. I think one of Web3's sort of ideals or promises is more of a decentralized internet, and it'd be really interesting to see how content gets created and distributed in that world.
And who owns the content,
Yeah.
right? Like, so, you know, we've got some things going on around, can consumers own certain elements of branded content? And do that leveraging the blockchain, and thereby, you know, they're betting on the brand in the future now. So we've got some tests going on in different markets around the world around that. On the other end, you know, all of this call for transparency in the media supply chain is another area where Web3 can come in, and how we're thinking about, you know, general ledgers to allow for an open understanding of media transparency. So we've got actually a couple of pilots on that going right now. So I think it's all of these are all, again, things that get me excited about where things are going, as we think about the fact that we're just at the beginning. I don't even know if we're even there truly in this new era of Web3.
Yeah, I think when we were catching up ahead of this, you know, you mentioned the level of control that consumers will have, and consumers being in control. I think it's a really interesting change in paradigms.
No, I mean, it's true. Like, everyone here has probably talked about, oh, the consumer's in control, the consumer's in control. In a decentralized web or world, even, it's not just web, but in a decentralized world, they will truly be in control. Not just like, you know, philosophically in control.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of, you know, areas where there's been maybe a shift in paradigms, work and the future of work is clearly one of those areas. I think everyone across the industry, as we were talking about, you know, is really keen to continue comparing notes as the world continues to evolve, and company expectations, employee expectations evolve as well. What are some of your thoughts around kind of most critical areas for companies to be thinking about, and for people to be thinking about, in terms of how the future of work will continue to shape up?
Yeah, I mean, one, there's been no manual or Harvard Business Review kind of case. There's going to be 1,000 now.
Yeah.
But up until now, there's been no manual. So I think we've all been trying to do our best at managing through all of the ups, downs, left, rights. And just when you think you have it figured out, a new variant and a new wave and new protocols enter the mind. And so for us, it's all about one word, and that's flexibility. I don't think we're going back ever to how we used to work, and I don't think we should. I think that there is incredible benefit in the way we are able to work now. I think what we are embracing a fully flexible work model, where if people want to come into the office because it's productive and conducive for them, they should be able to do that. If it's more productive for them to work from home, then that should be a factor that they can take advantage of as well. I think what we're trying to focus on is there are some tasks, there are some opportunities where people are best together. What are those? And then for somebody who might not want to be together or might not be able to be, how do we facilitate a hybrid ability for that individual who's not there? And what this allows us to do is now think about different types of people who can work, where people can work. And this notion of radical teaming and collaboration allows us to be much more flexible versus, you need to be in the office these days with this group. And so we're building teams based on, input from different geographies, and not just in the United States, but now teams can exist, in a much more virtual and broader environment as well. So it allows us to be, I think, much more reflective of where society is going, much more global and diverse in our thinking, but also much more attuned to where, people are expecting their ways of working, and wanting to be a little bit more flexible themselves.
That's great. I wanted to just take a second to remind people that if there are any questions in the audience, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll be glad to ask Doug. Doug, coming back to what we were just on, how does this new flexibility create, better opportunities for the work that you do with clients? And is there, do you see the same kind of flexibility that you're offering to your employees within the organizations of many of your clients? And are there any challenges in some of those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out what's best. We have certain clients that are less flexible, and have greater expectations, and depending on their business, that makes a lot of sense. So we understand that, and we're building the team and the way we work for that client based on that. But then we see other clients that really embrace this. So what we want to be able to do is build something that's right for our people, but also right for how we work with our clients, because we are in a service business. The way we're handling that is looking at charters, so that it's very clear, if you're working on this team, here's the expectations for how we look at that.
Interesting. And are you finding that this level of flexibility is important and critical in attracting and retaining talent?
Yeah, we do. We think we think this is part of what will make us attractive in this talent war right now. A lot of people are talking about this as the great, resignation or great reconciliation. I think this is a great moment to think how attractive you are as an employer. What does your employee experience look like? What are your values? What do you stand for? What's your purpose and mission? And how can you use that to attract the best talent possible? And so it's not, to me, as much about attrition. Yes, we want, and we're doing everything to manage that, probably like everyone here is doing. But I'm equally and very excited for what we're doing to attract the talent we want for the future.
That's great. And I'd love to connect a couple of the topics that we've been talking about. So you've been in the industry for a few years.
Yeah.
And there are probably some folks on the line who are maybe earlier in their careers, or kind of growing through their respective organizations. When we look at the technology inflection point that we're going through, do you have any advice for people on how to use this kind of some tectonic plate shifting and how they advance their own careers, and how they think about using this time and new technologies, perhaps new currencies with attention, into making a bigger mark in their professional careers and on the organizations in which they're working, whether they're in an agency or within an advertiser? Any specific advice come to mind, or lessons learned by dialing back to the 07-08 period, or maybe a few years before there?
Yeah, many years before there. I mean, have thirst. Is probably the core of, I think, my spirit as I've looked at. I've always been around, and I feel lucky and fortunate to get into the digital world in the mid 90s. And I got into the mobile world, before the iPhone, and I'm excited to be in the NFT and messing around. And, I've lost a little coin in the Bitcoin space, not the crypto space, but I've learned a hell of a lot. And I think, the point is to try, to put yourself out there, to learn about some of these things. And to be able to have command is, I think, really important. So it just starts with having a thirst. And one thing I ask of my team is, don't just answer the questions, question the answers. And being able to kind of think in that way is really important for you to harness what might be next, what is coming next. And, especially as we're sitting here talking, under the banner of setting the stage. And this is a perfect time period. And if we were all in Vegas last week for CES, we would have, or was that 2 weeks? No, it was last week. It's all emerging. But we would have used that as a mechanism to be inspired and think about all the things we can accomplish in the year ahead. And that just takes a lot of, desire, for thirst, for curiosity as you look at everything.
Yeah, and I think the flip side to that, maybe coming back to the topic of attention, is there is so much happening right now. And as you said, our attention as consumers, but also as professionals, is perhaps under assault. Any words of wisdom on how to choose and prioritize some of the key areas that we should focus on as media advertising practitioners and professionals in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core of it, we have to figure out, and one of the things that I'm personally excited by for the year ahead, and we at Dentsu are committed to, is attention and addressability. I think each of those independently is significant and will drive monumental change to our environment, our entire industry. But then you put the two together, and what the overlap of better addressable ads, more attentive ads, what that means to then the value of advertising is, I think, really exciting. And it just proves that this is such a vibrant and wonderful field that we can all get excited and be excited for. At times we all think about Tuesdays at 2:00 not being the best time ever. But I think when you step back and think about like some of the monumental shifts that are going on and how everyone here can be a part of this change, that we all need to embrace. We all know that we have opportunity to make advertising better, to make marketing stronger, and better connect brands to consumers and consumers to brands. So for me, I think that's what's most exciting.
Great. So if you were a betting man, Doug, how long do you think it's going to take for the effective attention CPM to become the norm in terms of transacting currencies in our space? Are we 12 months out? Are we 5 years out? Are we?
I think we're somewhere in between. I like to look at technology on 7-year arcs, and there's a lot of work that you can look at that thinks about how long until something, from when something was first introduced until where it becomes more normalized. And it's about 7 years. So if I looked at some of the early attention work, started around 2018, 2019, I think 2025, 2026. And again, that feels long away. But with the pace of how things are going, that's only a few upfronts from now when we think about it. So, not far off. I don't think 5 years, but certainly there's a lot of work that needs to be done over the next couple of years to be able to allow us to get there.
Yeah, and I think the timing is really interesting given all of the changes happening in the measurement space. outside of attention, but it seems like a very ripe moment for this new metric to be embraced in a very active way.
Yeah, and I think, what it's going to force us to do as an industry is move away from the GRP, right, as a legacy metric, and be able to subscribe to something that's a little bit more modern and based on today's world versus a world of 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, indeed, lots of opportunities there. I think we have a few minutes left. Again, anyone who wants to drop questions into the Q&A or chat, feel free to do so, and I'll raise them to Doug. Doug, let's take maybe a couple minutes to talk about how Dentsu sees some of the innovation in the gaming space. I know this is somewhere you've been investing. It's obviously kind of linked to the metaverse or some of the Web3 opportunities. What are some of the things that you all are specifically doing there? I know there was a launch last year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is where it's fortunate to have an East meets West kind of orientation to us, is really tapping into the gaming culture and life cycle. And the reality is we're all gamers in some way, either because we're all playing in some form of a game, or we all like the notion of a value exchange, which is the heart of a game. You give, you get. And so we launched Gentoo Gaming about 6 months ago, recognizing after a few years of doing considerable investment in the space, the power that it has for brands. And it's not just like putting brands into games. It could be the notion of gaming. And so it's very different to think about game versus gaming. And we do see it as the introduction or connectivity to a lot of the Web3 elements that we were talking about, Jeremy, before.
Got it. We do have a question. I would love to hear more about Dentsu's approach to working with their clients to support minority-owned media objectives. And can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love that. I think, we are all working hard to expand and diversify the media landscape. Earlier this year, last year, we created a team called Economic Empowerment that is all about partnering with minority and diverse media owners to help gain exposure, to drive greater adoption, and to really help our clients diversify their media spend. Through that, we've been building capabilities with many of these media owners. And one of the things I'm most proud that we did at Dentsu was launch 30-day payment terms for diverse and minority-owned media owners. So we built out a whole program for how we are, expediting payment, which really is the epitome of economic empowerment, because we're able to then allow those media owners, many who are small and don't have the resources, to then be able to invest in new content. And by creating new content, it creates new advertising opportunities that then allow that media owner to grow and drive that broader economic change that we're looking for.
And I would imagine you're also seeing a lot of appetite and adoption from the advertiser community in terms of supporting those media owners.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, again, we're fortunate to have some great clients that are not just, so many leading in this space, and we partner with them, and in some cases we follow what they're doing because they're taking their own leadership positions as well.